everyone, welcome back. Hope you guys have had an awesome weekend. Great start to the week so far. I mean, what better way to start the week than with history? So, hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys are um, staying positive, staying encouraged, and I just want to encourage you any way I can. I want to say I miss you guys, and I really hope that you guys are doing well, doing all right. Well, let's get started. We got a lot to get to. We're gonna end the war today. So let's see what's going on in Africa. We're first gonna see Italy fall first. We've seen Russia kind of hold to a standstill, and then we start to see the Axis falling. Why they call it an Axis power? Because they believe that the world would turn around Rome and Berlin, the two capitals of the major countries. Japan's kind of over there doing its own thing. But in 1943, the uh, Italy, I'm sorry, Africa will fall, mainly because of Montgomery and Eisenhower. These two men together are going to greatly turn the tide of the war in Africa, and were able to push Mussolini out of Africa, which pushes him to Italy, which he's still not able to hold his own there. So Mussolini is pretty weak through this whole time. But thanks to especially Montgomery, who's going to be one of the biggest names in North Africa, is going to push back the Axis powers. Now, you see Dwight D. Eisenhower, we're going to mention his name later, so please don't forget him. But um, looking at some of these big names that we're talking about in the war are really the big three countries. You see it listed, they're actually called the big three. Churchill from England, Roosevelt from the US, and Stalin from Russia. It's like, why is Britain and US friends with Russia? They're communists. Well, at this point, we're fighting one common enemy, Hitler and Mussolini, the Axis powers. So we are going to side with anyone who is going to fight against Hitler. In this case, it's communists. Now, Churchill will not like Stalin at all. In fact, I want you to notice how those names are listed. Churchill, Roosevelt's in the middle, and Stalin. Really, Roosevelt was always pictured, and Roosevelt was really always in between Churchill and Stalin because Churchill and Stalin did not get along at all. Roosevelt will kind of be the middleman, and sadly, he's going to side with Stalin most of the time because we see here that they're going to call many summits. In fact, this one was in Casablanca, Morocco, and they decided the big three decided we are not going to have a repeat of World War One. We're not just going to give up on the war early. Whereas in World War One we called it armistice. It wasn't like both armies. Um, it wasn't like the Allies went all the way into Germany, crushed Germany. No, we called a truce. We called it armistice. Well, at Morocco in Casablanca, the big three decided, listen, we're not going to do that. We are going to have unconditional surrender to where you give up 100% and we are going to totally crush you. We are not going to give in to this little armistice or this ceasefire. We are going to accept nothing but unconditional surrender. Kind of reminds us of a general in the Civil War that you may think about. U.S. Grant. Hopefully you got that. But they're saying nothing but unconditional surrender. Now, Churchill wants to focus on the eastern part of Europe and mainly, yes, he's wanting to attack Germany, but he wants to keep Stalin and the Soviets in check. He wants to make sure that they're not being aggressive or overstepping their bounds. Well, guess who Roosevelt is going to side with? Stalin, because Stalin wants the Allies as far away as possible so he can do his own thing. He says, Allies, focus on the western part of Europe, and I'll take control of the eastern part. And and Roosevelt will side with Stalin. So that is why we have D-Day, also known as the invasion of Normandy, also known as Operation Overlord. This master plan was headed up by Dwight D. Eisenhower. At least he was the main guy in charge. So he has a tough decision to make, especially when the weather starts to get not as cooperative. Because he picks June, which should be a relatively good time for the invasion, but the weather has to be right, the water conditions have to be right. And the first 2 days that he has planned for the invasion is not good with weather, so he's getting very nervous. But finally, the time comes. He gathers all these troops. We're talking not only American troops, but Canadian troops and British troops. All Allied troops are coming together in England to get ready for the greatest amphibious invasion. Amphibious is going from water to land. So this is the greatest one. It's not the first one, but it's the biggest one that the world has ever seen. And it was a success mainly because the Germans were completely off guard. In fact, what the Allies did was they knew that Germany was going to expect an invasion. They knew the Allies were coming on to Europe at some point. So what the Allies did is they did a fake. So they kind of dangled this meat in front of them, saying, "This is where we want you to think we're attacking, and then we're going to attack over here." So they made these inflatable tanks. They made inflatable um, tents, and they made a fake army. And they even had communication back and forth that the Germans they let the Germans pick it up, and they let the Germans hear where they were planning on attacking. They did maneuvers in the water so that the spies would see that, oh, they're getting ready for an invasion, but they were actually planning on invading Normandy. So they completely catch the Germans off guard. In fact, Hitler is sleeping whenever they invade. They invade right as the sun is coming up. They travel across the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of the night. And as the sun is coming up, the Germans start to see all these boats coming toward them. The boats start shelling the beach. Paratroopers have landed back inside of France, and now they are trying to sandwich the Germans in with the boats coming in, the men coming in, and the paratroopers to sandwich them off, establish a beachhead, and then move into Europe. Well, Hitler was asleep, and he was told not to be disturbed. So now what do you do if you're the general? Do you wake him up after he said not to be disturbed and risk everything? Or do you obey what he said and then risk getting in trouble for not telling him? That's tough. Well, they decided not to tell him. And he woke up and he was happy. Why would Hitler be happy? Because he says, now we got him. Why is he saying now? Because now he doesn't have to go to England to fight the armies. They're here on European land. So he says, now we got him. Now we can attack. And he's going to try one great offensive, which is going to work, but it's actually going to be his downfall. Now he's going to try and fight back, and he's going to put up a resistance, but really it's done, especially once the Allies have established the beachhead. It's done. He's going to try and use this miracle weapon, which are the V2 rockets, which V stands for, well, it's a German word. It's on page 501. But the translation, it's Bergeltungswaffe. If you guys know what that means. It's a retaliatory weapon, so he's using it to retaliate against the Allies. And it's going to be a feared missile. It's going to be pretty successful, but he could never get the atomic weapon, which is exactly what he was going for. But many of the German scientists defect and go to the Allies because they did not want that to fall in the hands of Hitler. Well, the next picture you see is D-Day. Imagine being in this boat. I have a wild imagination, so I'm just trying to imagine what that was like. Gunfire, you see shrapnel on the beach. The Germans had built this defense all up and down the French coast to stop this Allied invasion. So those traps, those are mines. There's barbed wire on the beaches. In fact, one of the beaches, they'll attack 5 different beaches. One of the beaches is just a cliff. So that makes it even more difficult for the Allies to advance. Each beach had something difficult with it. But we should never forget what these brave men did on that day, June 6, 1944. We still remember it to this day, D-Day. This is a preparation for it. Imagine meeting the guys a couple days before June 6th and being told, no, not today. Here they get all ready and then they say, no, get off, we're not going today. So all this preparation and to have that weight on Eisenhower's shoulders, I can only imagine what he was feeling. But it was a success, which was a very good win, big win for the Allies. Now, moving over to the Pacific, because there's the European theater or the European fighting, and then you have the Pacific fighting. The Japanese are getting very, very aggressive. They're trying to get as much land as possible. In fact, what they'll end up doing is going too far, where they spread themselves too thin. America will come in and defeat them. But they overpower the Philippines. The Americans had bases on the Philippines. In fact, Douglas MacArthur was there, and he was told to leave. So he says and promises, I will return to the Filipinos and the fighters there. Well, they're going to be brutally tortured and many killed, especially on the Bataan Death March whenever he leaves. So the Philippines undergoes tremendous pain and agony with the Japanese aggressive empire. But Douglas MacArthur will return as he promised. Now, the United States will get strength back. In fact, the two major battles that they are going to win is the Battle of Coral Sea and the Battle of Midway. Battle of Midway is going to be the turning point of the war. And because of this, we are focusing on just the major islands. It's called island hopping, where you're not going to take every single island all the way up to Japan, is you're only going to focus on the major ones on your way up. And then you had to make a decision, were you going to attack Japan full on? Well, one of the islands that they really focus on is Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These are the two major islands that they want to take. In fact, Iwo Jima is probably the most famous one, but they want these because of the launching pad for planes and for an invasion force on Japan. Now, the Japanese are going to be ruthless fighters. They are going to fight to the death. They are told not to surrender. It's in their religion, it's in their mindset to obey the emperor at all costs. They are not going to surrender. In fact, they were so desperate that they would fly their planes into the boats of the United States Navy. Why? Because they were willing to give their lives, and it's a suicide mission. These are suicide pilots, the kamikaze pilots, that would fly their planes into the boats. It would cause an inflicting damage on the boat on our ships, but the Japanese were very, very difficult to fight. MacArthur will come back and he will start moving toward Japan. He has promised that he will return. This is probably the most famous picture of Iwo Jima. In fact, I believe all but one of those men in this picture will die. This is the top of the mount of Iwo Jima, very small mountainous island, but because of the ruthlessness of the Japanese, they are going to fight to the last man, and it will become very costly. That's why we go with the nuclear weapons. One advantage that we did have was the Navajo code talkers. These were the Navajo Indians that would talk to each other in their native language, but since the rest of the world had no idea really who the Navajo Indians were, this code, if you will, their own natural language, was uncrackable, if that's a word, that they were able to just speak their language and be able to talk in code. So the Navajo code talkers are going to become very, very important to the U.S. Army. Well, going back to Europe, we're going to see Germany fall first. In fact, we said the last major offensive that they have is the Battle of the Bulge, which is going to be successful only for a little bit, but really what it does is it just stretches Hitler so short that he's not able to fight back. So he's done. Notice we're in February now, 1945. This is one of the last times that we will see Roosevelt because he will pass away very early in 1945. And we see him at Yalta Conference. This is to establish the policies for the months ahead as we start to see the war ending. And then after Roosevelt passes off the scene, then we're going to see his vice president, Truman, come to power. Notice again how they're sitting, Roosevelt in the middle. Again, Churchill and Stalin did not get along very well, but it's pretty sad to say Roosevelt would always side, not always, but most of the time side with Stalin. Kind of shows you where Roosevelt's mindset was. Well, here's the end of the war. My time is almost done, so I'll finish with the next video with the end of the war.